Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to another Java tutorial in our Java tutorial series. And in this tutorial we are going to be covering hash maps and linked hash maps. Now, like in our other Java collections tutorials, we have notes up on the screen in the editor for you guys to read over while I explain it. So, hash maps and linked hash maps. What exactly are they? Well, they're a type of collection that take in key value pairs. And each key has to be unique. So if you have one key that is a string of hello, you can't have another key that is a string of hello. Or if you have a key with a value of 1, you can't have another key that is 1. However, you can have the same keys, not the same keys, the same values across different keys. So if you have different keys, and each of those keys holds a value of 1, that's fine. It's not going to complain. Now, you can also have null keys. So null can be a key, but you can only have one key that is null because of the rule that we just stated, where each key has to be unique. You can, however, have multiple null values assigned to different keys. So like you can have a null key and a null value, and then a key that has hello, and then a null value associated with that. That's no problem. Now, just like the hash set and linked hash set, these are not synchronous. They're not synchronized. Hash maps don't maintain any particular order. It doesn't maintain the insertion order. It doesn't maintain a ascending or descending order or anything like that. It really doesn't maintain one. The default capacity, if you don't define one yourself, will be 16. However, like the array list and linked array list, hash set, and linked hash set, they will expand if you go past that 16 mark. So there's no issue there. It's not like an array where it's fixed all the time. So with that, let's move on to the linked hash map. Like the normal hash map, it contains key value pairs. So whenever you see a hash map or linked hash map in the documentation, it'll have angle brackets, and inside of those angle brackets, it'll have a capital K, comma, capital V. The K stands for key, and V stands for value, and we'll go into why that's important here in a second. So, like the hash map, it can only contain unique keys, and same thing applies for null keys and null values. You can have only one null key, but multiple null values associated with multiple keys. The linked hash map isn't synchronous either, just like every other hash whatever we've covered. Now, the linked hash map does maintain a specific order, and that is the insertion order. So whatever order that you inserted key value pairs into the linked hash map, it'll maintain that order. And just like the normal hash map, the default capacity is 16 elements, but again, that will expand if you go past 16, so there's no issue there in that regard. Now, how do we work with these hash maps and linked hash maps and all that stuff? Well, let's go into our main method, and we're going to define a few. We're going to define a hash map and a linked hash map, and we'll show you how to put items in and take items out, right? And how to clear them, that kind of stuff. So we'll say map. And why do we put map here? Well, map is the interface that HashMap and LinkedHashMap ultimately implement from. So map. And then this is where we go with the K, comma, V. So if we go and say map, right? Typically, in the documentation, it will say, oh, we want K and V. So we go to the autocomplete, it generates it for us. So we can see K and V. What do we put here? Well, we put the types that we want to have associated with our keys and what type that we want our values to be. So in this case, we're going to say we want our keys to be strings and our values to be integers. Now, you could store a bunch of Boolean options in here. So like, say, is in dark mode, or is device in portrait, or something like that. That kind of stuff. You can store in here and then reference those keys to get those values associated with that. But we're going to say a string and an integer. This sort of setup can be useful for dealing with inventory, for example. You can say each key is going to be what kind of product you have, and then the integer is how many of those you have in stock. So we're going to say, we're going to call this stock, for like grocery store stock, is equal to a new hash map. And then we say string and integer, just like that. And there we go. Make sure you import map and hash map, like I've already done. They come from the java.util package, just like list and array list and hash set and all that stuff. Now, how do I put items into the hash map? Well, that's pretty simple. You go ahead and type stock, or whatever you called your object here, dot, so stock dot put, and then here we give it a key and a value. So for example, we'll say apples, and we have 32 apples left. Just like that. And we can keep doing that. So stock dot put, we'll say bananas. We'll say we have 60 bananas left, etc., etc. Now, how do we print this stuff out to the console? We're going to want to print this out. Well, before we do that, you can see we have a red line here, and I said integers rather than integer, so there we go. All right, so now, how can we print out to the console the values that we have associated with our keys, or how do we print out our keys, that kind of stuff? Well, we can do this by saying, well, do we have a maps class? Because arrays we had an arrays class. Let's try it. Maps dot. No, we in fact do not. So that's 100% fine. Instead, Instead, what you need to do is you can loop through these. So in order to loop through these, hash maps will have it'll basically have a excuse me. It will have a method that will return all the entries in a set. So this will say, hey, we want to get all of the keys where we'll have an entry. So in order to get this to work properly, we'll go for every Map.Entry. It's going to be a string and an integer. We're going to call it entry inside of stocks.entry set, just like that. All right. Now you can see we do have an error here. So let's see what we did wrong. Stock.entry set, just like that. Cool, we fixed it. And with that, we can then go ahead and say system out print line, and in here we are going to be saying there is plus and then entry dot entry dot, and then we have a few different things. We can get the key associated with this, or we can also say toString or get the value. In this case, we're going to get the value. So get value. And then we'll say plus sign with a space. We'll say with a space afterwards. And then we need to get entry dot get entry dot get key left, just like that. Now let's go through what we just did. So we have a hash map that takes in a string and integer for its key value pairs, where the string is its key and the integer is its value. So we're calling it stock for grocery store stocks, and then we set it to a new hash map, yada yada yada. Then we put apples and bananas into our hash map, where we say 32 and 60 are the values respectively here. And now we're looping through all of the entries inside of this hash map. So Map.Entry defines what a specific entry of a key value pair inside of the hash map. And we're getting all those entries from the entry set from our hash map. So we have entry set returns a set that has an entry object of key value pairs. So then we print out the specific key and the value. So let's go ahead then and run this. And you can see down here in our console, we see there is 32 apples left, and there is 60 bananas left. So that's how hash maps work. Now, the linked hash map works very similarly. Right? So let's say, let's go back to our empty main method here, and we're gonna define a linked hash map. Right? So in order to do that, we're going to say map, and we're going to say this is going to have we'll say this is like a game, like a GameStop sort of store's stock, just to give something a little bit different instead of a grocery store stock. So string for the product name, which is going to be our key, and then our value is going to be an integer for how many we have in stock. And we'll say game stock is equal to a new linked hash map. String for the value, for the keys, and then integer for the value. Now this works very similarly to the normal hash map. So game stock dot put not compute, put. And now it's going to need the key and the value. So we're going to say the key is GTA 5, and we'll say we have 10 copies left. And then we'll say game stock dot put and in here we're going to say, we'll say Sonic Mania, and then we'll say we have 10 copies of it left as well. Just to show you that we can have the same values multiple times, we just can't have the same key. To show you that we can have the same value but not the same key, we're going to say game stock dot put, we'll say Sonic Mania, just like that. And we'll say 10 after that as well. All right. Now, let's loop through all of our entries. Right? So you would think, just by the lines of code that we wrote, we would have three elements inside of our linked hash map. Not so much. So we'll say for every map.entry, a string integer entry inside of game stock dot entry set. So it's the same process that we went through with our normal hash map. We'll say system out println. We'll say we have entry dot get value plus a space, and then we'll say entry.getKey plus in stock. Just like that, right? So go ahead and save it. And then run the code. And you can see we have 10 GTA 5 in stock and 10 Sonic Mania in stock. And there's no third entry because we had a duplicate key. Sonic Mania was already defined as a key. So what it essentially did was it went and said, oh, okay, we're defining a new value for Sonic Mania. So it just changed it from 10 to 10. Kind of useless when you think about it that way. But that's how you update values as well. So you can say, oh, I need to update this. Well, put with the key and then a new value. And that'll update. So that is the basics of how you use hash maps and linked hash maps. However, I want to show you a real-world example that you might actually use, for example, in a coding interview, right? There might be an interview question that'll ask you, use a hash map or linked hash map, or it might just say use a map to find and record the different occurrences of certain values. Find all the occurrences of the values in an array. So I've went through the liberty of writing those functions, and we're going to go over them. Right? So our first one here is our function for generating a random array. This will take in what size you want, what the minimum number is supposed to be, and what the maximum number is supposed to be for any given value. So we have that function, right? Pretty simple function. And then we have our function to loop through that array, right? And test for the different values and the different keys. And it will record how many instances or occurrences of that given key it finds. So we have a map. We're going to return this map because, as you can see, its return type is in fact a map. So we're calling this get element occurrences, or get elements occurrency counts, right? This can be anything you really want it to be, but we're going to say we want to find all the elements from this integer array. And with that, we're looping through the array. So for every value inside of the array, we assign it as a key. So string key. And then if the map contains that key, then we will put into the map, so update the value of the given key to whatever the current key, or whatever the current value is in that key, by 1. So increment it by 1. Otherwise, assign that key to 1 because we just found it only once so far. And once all that is done, it will then return the map. So let's actually use this, and you can see what it actually does in action. So first off, an integer array We're going to call it nums. And we're going to set it equal to get random array. And we want the count to be 100. Or no, we're going to say 200. And then we want the minimum value to be 10. And the maximum value to be 100. Right. Well, actually, let's say 1 to 100. So 1 to 100 in terms of our values. So now we have a 200 length array with values from 1 to 100 all generated randomly. And then we're going to define a map. So we're going to say this map is going to be a string and an integer, like we have defined in our function. With that, we'll say, we'll call this O, just for simplicity. We're going to set it equal to get elements occurrences. And then we pass it in our nums array. So at this point then, we now have our map with how many occurrences each value in the array has. And then, now, we're going to loop through that map and see just how many times something occurred. So, with that, we'll say for every Map.Entry string integer entry inside of O.entry set, just like that. We can then go system out print line. And inside of that print statement, we want O.get, or we want, not O.get, we want entry.get key occurred and then we want to say entry.get value times, just like that. Cool. Now we can go ahead, save it, and run it. And so, let's go ahead and see what we have. So, we have our list of numbers. So you can see 27 occurred 4 times, 85 occurred 4 times, some of them occurred only once, some of them occurred more than others. But because of the range, we have a small amount of occurrences for each because they're spread out. So what if instead of 1 to 100, right? Instead of 1 to 100, we said 1 to 20. Much less options. Much less options than we had before. So we can then go ahead and save it and run it. And here we are. You can see they occurred in much higher frequencies than before. So it's looking like the highest occurrency that we had was 17. Or not so much 17, but 16. Either way, we got, the highest is 17, and 17 occurred 17 times. Nice. But yeah, so that basically, that's how you would solve that particular interview problem. At least the way I would think about it. There are other ways of doing it. So don't take this as, oh, this is the definitive way of doing it, and if I don't do it this way, I'm going to get it wrong. No. There's multiple ways of doing it. You don't have to do it this way. It's just one way of doing it. That's all. So that basically does it for this video, guys, on hash maps and linked hash maps and how you can use them in a real world interview example. So thank you all so very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. See ya.